The ruling body at the top of the bloodlines all originate from Cain, Abel's brother. They inherited from their ancestors a strong taste for violence and the curse of sacrifices not approved by God. Knowing that the door of divine satisfaction is forever closed to them, they have revolted and partnered with Satan against mankind. Since Cain murdered his brother Abel, centuries after centuries, generations after generations, the prominent descendants of the bloodlines continues to lead the war against mankind. In mockery and imitation of God's 12 tribes, Satan blessed 12 bloodlines. The 13th and final bloodline was copied after God's royal lineage of Jesus and is the Merovingian bloodline. It's safe to say that Queen Elizabeth considers herself to be a part of the Merovingian bloodline, the satanic house of David. The Rothschilds and other top satanic families in a lesser way financed a Jewish Mason and devout Satanist named Karl Marx to write his Das Kapital. The Satanists controlling key Masonic groups, along with some other groups they controlled, got communism started. The original idea came from Satan and was given at a feast of the beast in meticulous detail to those highest in the satanic hierarchy. But how do you know who's on your side? Who knows the plan? Well, there are symbols of the occult that are used throughout the ages that help them communicate with each other. In this particular instance, we're going to look at just one, just to give you an idea of how it works, and it's about the hidden hand.
It happens far too often to be coincidence. This hiding of the hand gesture is actually from the 13th degree of Freemasonry, which is also known as the Royal Arch degree. It is symbolized with the triple Tau. Now this gesture is the sign of the master of the second veil. I won't go into the details of it, but basically what this gesture is doing is signaling to other initiates that they're part of the secret brotherhood and that their actions are inspired by Masonic beliefs. What they are saying is, it doesn't matter what I appear to be on the surface, this secret gesture tells you that we are working towards the same utopian end, you and I. We are both enlightened with the illuminating knowledge of Masonry. Remember in the Jesuits' oath they talked about being on opposing sides in public, but secretly we're working towards the same end. That's why we have both communists and capitalists making the same gesture here. Think also of the Hegelian principle, where two seemingly opposing ideologies are rubbed up against one another to create a synthesis. What these famous leaders are saying to the initiated is that there is a hidden force or hidden hand guiding the course of history, and that they are a part of it.
The Rothschilds, the pure bloods, are Nephilim, and yes, they wanted to establish communism, but the Talmud states that the leader of the world also needed a king, a Jewish king. So how were they going to do this? How would they accomplish the king of the Jews? Well, as there are no remnants of the ancient Jewish royalty, and in order to fulfill the prophecy, Jewish royalty must be reestablished. Let's take a closer look at Queen Victoria and Prince Albert and see how their marriage secretly helped the agenda of the Rothschilds with their Jewish royal monarchy.
Right. Because obviously the royal family, the British family that sits on the throne, is a German family. It's called the, the Gotha Saxe-Coburg or Coburg Saxe.
Yeah, well, they're called Saxe. They're called Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. But it was really the German Saxe-Coburg und Gotha. And Prince Albert was supposed to be a Saxe-Coburg und Gotha, but he was illegitimate. He was actually just Albert of Saxony. So the illegitimate Albert of Saxony went to marry Queen Victoria, and they knew that he was illegitimate. Then they changed his name to Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, an anglicized version of a name that actually didn't apply to Prince Albert. Prince Albert was illegitimate. He was Albert of Saxony, and of Saxony just meant that you're an illegitimate closely associated with the duchy. So Queen Victoria actually married the second in line to the British throne, Blind Prince George of Cumberland. They married in 1834, and when she married Prince Albert of Saxony, it was a bigamous marriage. And Prince Albert died a virgin. He never sired any of Queen Victoria's official 9 children. Mm-hmm. And it was only 2.5 years after the last 9th child was born that Albert received the title Prince Consort Albert. Because he was never actually the consort. He received the title Prince Consort Albert, and then he died about 5 years later in 1861, and he was killed by, he was given a cold, caught a slight cold, and then he was put in the Blue Room at Windsor Castle, chained to the bed, physically chained to the bed, with the windows left open in winter in December. And from that he got pneumonia and died. So Prince Albert was killed. He died a virgin at the age of 42 and did not sire any of Queen Victoria's 9 official children. Mm. And the reason for that was that the Rothschilds wanted to have an illegitimate British royal family so that they could entirely control it.
But the British ruling family never gave up their German heritage or sympathies, some members even going so far as to secretly side with Hitler and the Nazis during World War II. In 1941, as war rages between the United Kingdom and Germany, Rudolf Hess, deputy Führer to Hitler himself, makes an emergency parachute landing in Scotland. With him are plans for peace between Great Britain and the fascist Nazi party. Once discovered, he is locked in the tower for the rest of his life. But what led a high-ranking Nazi and member of Hitler's inner circle to believe he could succeed in such an ambitious endeavor? Could it be that Hitler believed England would be willing to make peace? If so, such an idea could have only come from one person. Edward VIII abdicated in 1936, supposedly to marry the love of his life, a man-crazed divorced actress portrayed in the movie The King's Speech. However, history shows a much darker motive. Monarchies across Europe had taken notice of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which saw the death of the entire Russian royal family. As a result, many were quick to see fascism as a way of preserving the monarchy, and were likely to harbor Nazi sympathies. Pictures recently surfaced showing Edward and the Queen Mother teaching the future Queen Elizabeth II to do a Nazi salute. Edward was himself a Nazi sympathizer and met with Hitler right before the war in 1937, as Germany was preparing for an all-out assault on Europe. He posed for publicity photos with Hitler's closest henchmen, including Goebbels, Himmler, and Göring, as well as the Führer himself. He was to take over as king again should England lose to Germany and act as Hitler's puppet. The royal family essentially had all their bases covered. If they lost, Edward would be king with his divorced wife, and they, at least, would still be in power. Even after abdicating, he made pro-Nazi speeches critical of England's involvement at a press statement, in which he openly called for peace. When war first broke out between England and Germany, Edward was given a symbolic position within the Naval Intelligence Agency to make it seem as if he was doing something in regards to the war effort. But in reality, Churchill had to be careful and make sure Edward never received any real intelligence, otherwise it would quickly find itself in Nazi hands. Frustrated by deliberately being left out of the loop, he quit the intelligence department. Churchill then moved him around the world, from Spain to the Bahamas, to keep him away from the Nazis, where he could not do any harm to the war effort. Still, he managed to take a vacation to America in which he planned on meeting with President Roosevelt in order to discuss Germany's peaceful intentions. Roosevelt, however, would have none of it, and even had the FBI tail the prince wherever he went during his well-publicized Miami excursion. For all their Nazi connections, you would think the royal family would try to distance themselves from the Third Reich as much as possible, but nothing would be further from the truth. Prince Harry created quite a stir a while back when he dressed in complete Nazi regalia to a party. A subtle tip of the hat to his uncle, perhaps? But it was Philip himself who trained as a child in the Nazi youth and founded the World Wildlife Federation, a depopulation organization, alongside Nazi SS officer Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands.
The boy is called Philip. Is Philip Schleswig, Holstein, Sonderburg, Glucksburg, and he grew up in Germany. He was raised amongst his Nazi in-laws, some of whom later became high-ranking members of the SS. His Nazi relatives then sent him to this school in southern Germany, where he studied for a while under the Nazi curriculum. Philip later recalled that there was much heel-clicking and shouts of Heil Hitler were compulsory.
Hitler had his own church, his own Bible, and even his own hymn, sung every day in German schools.
Philip in Darmstadt, in the heart of Germany, in November 1937, attending a family funeral for some of his Nazi in-laws. Marching in front of a Sieg-Heiling crowd, this is Philip, next to Christoph, his SS brother-in-law, and Philip, his Nazi stormtrooper brother-in-law. Imagine if a man with a past like this had somehow ended up marrying into British aristocracy. Well, he did. And as we know, he got first prize. He became the Duke of Edinburgh, also known as Prince Philip, after marrying Princess Queen of England.
In fact, all of Philip's sisters married high-ranking Nazis.
In the 20th century alone, there have been over 100 million deaths due to communism ideology. No one knows for sure what the true number would be, but I'm sure it's a lot more than that. Now we have Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II is in charge of the Committee of 300, which is the main organization today that is controlling the world and pushing communism everywhere. The network is so vast and unfathomable, it interconnects secret societies, banks, business, political parties, and security agencies. It's interesting to note that over 400 years ago, we got an inkling of what the House of Windsor, or Elizabeth, meaning lizard, was all about. In 2010, scientists investigating a 400-year-old portrait of Queen Elizabeth I made a very curious discovery: a hidden snake in the Queen's hand. The mysterious painting was created in the late 1580s or early 1590s by an unknown artist. It is Elizabeth I, depicting a magnificent jewel-laden gown, with a faint smile and a small posy of flowers in her hand, a conventional symbol of virginity and virtue. The painting's deterioration over time has caused an image beneath the posies to resurface, that of a dark-colored snake coiled around the Queen's fingers. Scientists believe that the artist originally painted Elizabeth holding a snake, then painted over it shortly afterwards with a posy. Since nobody knows who the artist was or what the circumstances surrounding the painting were, we can't be sure of the exact motivations. However, we do have to ask, what was Elizabeth hiding? Was there a deep, dark secret? David Icke proposes the possibility that the royal family is hiding something that's very sinister. Perhaps the snake in the painting is intended to be a clue of the Queen's true nature. Queen Elizabeth II might just resonate that dragon or snake imagery. The fallen or Nephilim are often depicted as a serpent or a dragon. The dragon is the male version of that bloodline. Dragon, Draco, Dracula. The serpent is the matriarchy or female bloodline. Queen Elizabeth II is a part of that serpent lineage and is also one of the Nephilim. David Icke taped an interview with Christina Fitzgerald, Princess Diana's personal confidant. This next section on Queen Elizabeth II is taken from that interview. The Queen Mother, now that's a serious piece of wizardry. The Queen Mother is a lot older than people think. To be honest, the royal family hasn't died for a very long time. They just metamorphosized. They take pieces of flesh and rebuild the body from a little bit. Because they're cold-blooded, it's much easier for them to do this. It could be something similar to the movie in Selfless, where you have a New York billionaire who's diagnosed with terminal cancer. He finds a business card directing him to a professor who informs him about a medical procedure called shedding, in which one's consciousness is transferred to an artificially grown body. Of course, the gentleman agrees to the procedure and follows the instructions to stage his own public death, and his consciousness is transferred into a new body. According to their secret knowledge, there's a special marker in the bloodline. In the DNA, they call it the gene of Isis. God of Isis will rule the next world. And, according to them, there is no need for mankind. Queen Elizabeth II can shed her skin like a reptilian and put on a new coat. And yes, she could be Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth I. It seems more reasonable that the agenda of the elite, which in this case is communism, does not need to be completed in one lifetime. There's no timeline which is absolutely necessary because there's always another day. It can be accomplished over hundreds of years. And when you're talking about the House of Windsor, you're talking about some ancient entities. Queen Elizabeth II, at her age, possesses enormous satanic power. Very few records of such power being used exist, but legend typically portrays them as undefeatable. Some even theorize that the only way for such creatures to be killed is if they desire it, or if it is at the hands of an antediluvian. Whether that is true or not, they seem to suffer from at least some of the traditional curses of vampirism, namely the thirst for blood, the ravages of the beast, and vulnerability to fire. Although they can master some of this through their disciplines over the ages and mitigate it somewhat, it is still a weakness to some degree. For these ancients like Queen Elizabeth II to survive in the modern world, they must have sufficient ability to hide their existence and activities from others, particularly considering the monumental effort that they have put forth into hiding their occult activity and making it difficult for us to locate their havens. For the House of Windsor, Balmoral is a very, very nasty place. It remains the private property of the royal family and is not part of the crown estate. Do you believe in coincidences? That's somewhere you'd want to dig underground. It goes back that far. As Queen Elizabeth is commonly believed to be directing the Committee of 300 and the Council of 13, she must also possess an incredible level of influence and knowledge, and perhaps even the ability to manipulate those who bear her bloodline. In fact, blood lineage is often cited as a factor of her power, and most assume that each lineage or bloodline is most concerned about their own bloodline or heritage or lineage. The inherited disciplines for the queen and her lineage would definitely be fortitude, dominance, and presence. They have, however, combined the disciplines of the Rothschild clan and the House of Windsor. They forge a future together to bring about communism and ultimately the end times. After thousands of years of evolution, the Queen's communism network is now a vast and often unfathomable web of interconnecting secret societies, banks, businesses, political parties, secret agendas or agencies. Think of the Committee of 300 and the Council of 13. Few things are as they seem in the House of Windsor. A political coup or economic crash or social trend may be merely a surface manifestation, veiling a centuries-old struggle. Among the bloodlines, elders like Queen Elizabeth command from the shadows, manipulating the deep state, the Committee of 300 and the Council of 13, and even the other bloodlines alike. And the Queen Mum is often manipulated in turn. Indeed, most combatants may not even realize for whom they fight or why. But it can't just end here. Let's look at a place where a seraphin angel loves the infinite creator. This is St. Michael's Cave on Mount Gargano. St. Michael appeared here 3 times, starting in 490 AD. Now, here's the secret. The sanctuary of St. Michael was not consecrated by human hands, but by Archangel Michael himself. And you can receive a rock, a stone, from the cave of St. Michael. In ages past, exorcists have prayed with these stones for the liberation of souls, but you can hold it while you meditate. Satan just doesn't like it. I'll put the information below so that you can have it sent to you for a very small donation directly from St. Michael's Cave on Mount Gargano. And here's another truth. We are all part of this angelic war, and we need to choose a side. Do we want to be good or bad? We have to choose between good and evil. We certainly don't want someone to choose this for us. So if you're feeling really bold, your mission can be to pray against the agenda of communism. Resurrect the power of infinite intelligence, which is the one infinite creator. The satanic bloodlines want your mind, because it is your own personal nuclear weapon. You can obliterate their rituals and sacrifices simply by stating your case to God against their rituals and sacrifices. So I leave you in the light and love of the infinite creator. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. I'll be covering metaphysics in the world today and trace the bloodlines throughout the ages, exposing their diabolical plan. Thanks for tuning in.